June 6, 1944, the day the fate of the world hung on a whisper. Across the English Channel, thousands of Allied ships gathered, engines rumbling like an oncoming storm. Hitler was certain he knew where they'd strike Calais. His generals fortified the wrong coast, waiting for an invasion that would never come. And that fatal mistake was the result of a single man's deception. A Spaniard. Not a soldier, not a trained spy. Just a man so obsessed with deceiving evil that he built an entire fake network of agents, all in his head. His name was Juan Pujol Garcia, codename Garbo. To the Germans, he was their most trusted informant in Britain. To the British, he was their secret weapon, a double agent who fed Hitler the lies that won D-Day. But what no one knew then was that Garbo had started this mission entirely on his own. No orders, no allies, just conviction and an extraordinary imagination. As bombs fell across Europe and empires clashed, this quiet, unassuming man from Barcelona would become the architect of one of the greatest deceptions in history, Operation Fortitude. The question is, how did an ordinary man convince Hitler to defend the wrong beach, and in doing so, change the course of World War II? Long before he became Garbo, Juan Pujol Garcia was just another restless dreamer, trapped in the chaos of a divided Spain. Born in Barcelona in 1912, he grew up amid political turbulence, monarchists, republicans, fascists, communists, all tearing the nation apart. When the Spanish Civil War erupted, Pujol was forced to serve, but he hated both sides. He saw brutality everywhere, executions, propaganda, lies, and it ignited something inside him, a vow to dedicate his life to fighting tyranny in every form. By the time World War II began, Europe was burning. Hitler's armies marched across the continent, crushing nations in weeks. Yet, Spain under Franco remained officially neutral, a perfect hiding place for a man with impossible ambitions. Pujol decided he would personally join the fight against Hitler. There was only one problem: no one wanted him. When he offered his services to the British embassy in Madrid, they laughed him off. He wasn't a soldier, not an agent, not even fluent in English. They dismissed him as a nobody. But Pujol didn't give up. If Britain wouldn't recruit him, he'd become a spy anyway. So he walked into the German embassy instead, pretending to be a fanatical Nazi sympathizer eager to serve the Reich. And to his surprise, they accepted. Armed with a fake passport, imagination, and sheer audacity, Pujol invented a British identity for himself, Agent Arabelle. The Germans believed he was operating from London, when in reality he was still hiding in Lisbon, Portugal, feeding them information copied from newspapers and travel brochures. Within months, Berlin considered him one of their most valuable informants in Britain. And all of it, every single report, was pure fiction. The irony was staggering. A man the British had rejected was now one of the Germans' most trusted spies. But the clock was ticking. Pujol knew that to make a real difference, he needed to reach London and turn this amateur deception into something far bigger. In early 1942, after months of feeding false reports from Lisbon, Juan Pujol finally caught the attention of the one organization that had previously ignored him, MI5, Britain's counterintelligence agency. His fake reports to the Germans had become so convincing that British analysts began intercepting them and wondering, who on earth is this mysterious spy in London, and why does he know so much? Yet, nothing checks out. When MI5 realized that the agent in question didn't actually exist, they tracked down Pujol and his wife Araceli and brought them to London. For the first time, the man who had been inventing lies from afar was standing inside the heart of the real intelligence war. In London, MI5 was skeptical. Could this eccentric Spaniard really deceive the German high command? But when Pujol explained how he'd created an entire imaginary spy network complete with fake agents, detailed expenses, and coded reports, their doubt turned to awe. He wasn't just a liar. He was an artist of deception. Under MI5 supervision, Pujol's web of fiction expanded into something extraordinary. With the help of case officer Thomas Harris, a bilingual British officer with a background in art and psychology, Garbo built an entire imaginary army of 27 agents, none of whom existed. Each agent had a personality, background, and job: a Welsh nationalist, a sailor in Glasgow, a typist in Whitehall, a pilot in Dover. All fake, but all reporting to Garbo. Through this illusion, MI5 could feed Hitler exactly what they wanted him to believe. Every letter, every coded message, every small piece of misinformation passed through Garbo's hands, and the Germans paid handsomely for it. To Berlin, Garbo was a genius embedded in London, surrounded by spies and informants. To the Allies, he was a priceless tool, a ghost shaping the enemy's view of the war. But with each success, the stakes grew higher, because one mistake, one suspicious detail could expose him and destroy Operation Fortitude before it even began. And then came the turning point. As the Allies prepared for the greatest invasion in history, D-Day Garbo would be asked to perform the impossible. Spring 1944. The Allies were preparing for the largest amphibious invasion in human history, Operation Overlord, the assault on Nazi-occupied France. But success didn't depend only on soldiers and tanks. It depended on deception. If Hitler could be convinced that the invasion would land anywhere but Normandy, his forces would be split and the Allies might have a chance to break through. That deception had a name: Operation Fortitude. And at its center was one man, Agent Garbo. From a small, nondescript house in London, Garbo began weaving his masterpiece. He and his MI5 handlers crafted hundreds of fake messages to his supposed contacts in the German High Command. In his reports, Garbo described the buildup of a massive army in southeast England, the 1st U.S. Army Group, commanded by none other than General George S. Patton. He even invented details: the insignia, the radio chatter, the troop movements, the fake camps filled with inflatable tanks and wooden planes, all to convince Berlin that the Allies were preparing to strike at Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. Meanwhile, in reality, the real invasion force was quietly assembling far to the west in Normandy. On June 6, 1944, D-Day began. At dawn, Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy under relentless fire. Yet even as the German divisions begged for reinforcements, Hitler hesitated. Why? Because his most trusted spy, Agent Garbo, had just sent him a message. The Normandy attack is only a diversion. The real invasion will come at Calais. The deception worked flawlessly. Hitler ordered his panzer divisions to stay near Calais, convinced the main assault was yet to come. For 7 crucial weeks, while Allied soldiers fought and died on the beaches and hedgerows of Normandy, Germany's strongest forces sat idle, waiting for an attack that never came. By the time Hitler realized the truth, it was too late. Normandy had fallen. France was free, and a single spy's imagination had changed the course of the war. In the days after D-Day, Berlin was ecstatic. Their top informant, Agent Arabelle, better known as Garbo, had once again predicted events with uncanny precision. They believed him completely, unaware that his lies had just doomed them. From his MI5 office in London, Garbo watched as the German High Command swallowed every word. They still believed Calais was the true invasion site, and Hitler refused to release his armored divisions even as Allied forces poured deeper into France. Garbo's deception had worked too perfectly. But the true absurdity came later that summer. In July 1944, as Germany reeled from defeat after defeat, Hitler personally approved a high military honor for Agent Arabelle, the Iron Cross Second Class. It was one of the highest awards a foreigner could receive. The medal was hand-delivered through secret channels along with a letter of gratitude signed by the German High Command. To them, Garbo was a hero, the spy who had saved Germany from disaster. Meanwhile, in London, MI5 was quietly preparing their own recognition. King George VI awarded Juan Pujol Garcia, the member of the Order of the British Empire MBE, for his extraordinary service in the cause of the Allies. 2 medals. One from Hitler, one from the King of England, each side believing he'd been their man. Yet Garbo's triumph was not one of glory or fame. It was one of quiet realization. He had fought a war not with bullets but with words, and the cost of those words weighed heavily on him. He had saved lives by deceiving millions. But in doing so, he had also helped wage the most elaborate psychological war in history. As the Allies advanced toward victory, Garbo began to wonder, when the guns fall silent, what happens to a man whose entire life is built on lies? When World War II finally ended in 1945, Europe erupted in celebration. Cities that had been in ruins began to rebuild. Nations mourned their dead and dreamed of peace again. But for Juan Pujol Garcia, the man who had fooled an empire victory brought only silence. The war had consumed his identity. For years, he had lived behind layers of deception, juggling double lives and fabricated agents. Now, with peace restored, there was no place for a man whose greatest weapon was a lie. MI5 quietly debriefed him, thanked him, and released him from service. To the outside world, Garbo ceased to exist. His name was classified, his story buried beneath official secrecy. Pujol felt the weight of invisibility. He had risked everything, his life, his family, his sanity to help defeat Hitler, and yet no one knew his name. In 1949, exhausted and disillusioned, he made a shocking decision. He faked his own death. Officially, Juan Pujol Garcia died of malaria in Angola. His wife and children mourned him. His British contacts closed his file. The world moved on. But in truth, Garbo was alive. He quietly slipped away to Venezuela, adopting a new identity and starting a modest business. For decades, he lived in obscurity, blending in with the crowds of Caracas, an invisible man who had once deceived the Führer himself. He rarely spoke of the past. He told no one of his medals, his lies, or the imaginary army that helped win D-Day. To those around him, he was simply Juan, a polite, reserved expatriate with haunted eyes. It wasn't until the 1,970 seconds, more than 30 years later, that a British historian tracking down wartime spies stumbled upon a rumor that Garbo might still be alive. When they finally found him living quietly in Venezuela, he was older, thinner, but unmistakably the same man. And when he told his story, even the historians struggled to believe it. A single man operating between two empires had changed the course of history and then erased himself from it. When Juan Pujol Garcia finally re-emerged from the shadows in the late 1,970 seconds, the world had changed. The Cold War had replaced the old battles of fascism and freedom. But when journalists and historians learned who he was, the man who deceived Hitler himself, they were astonished. Here was a man with no army, no weapons, no formal training, who had single-handedly manipulated the Nazi war machine. A man whose imagination and conviction had shifted the tide of history. In 1984, at the 40th anniversary of D-Day, Garbo was invited to Normandy. He stood quietly among veterans who had fought and bled on those beaches, men who never knew that part of their survival was thanks to him. Tears filled his eyes as he looked out at the waves. For decades, he had carried a secret so heavy that even time could not erase it. He had lied to save lives, deceived to protect freedom. And in that silence, as flags fluttered in the sea breeze, the old spy smiled faintly. For the first time in his life, he felt peace. Garbo died in 1,988 inches Caracas, Venezuela. He was 76 years old, a forgotten hero who never sought glory only, meaning. Today, his story stands as one of the greatest paradoxes in history, that truth can sometimes only survive through lies. The quiet genius from Barcelona didn't just fool an empire. He proved that even in the darkest of times, courage doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a gun. Sometimes it wears a disguise. Sometimes it hides behind coded words and invisible networks. And sometimes it saves the world.